Can we start by asking you to tell us your name and where you live, please?
My name is Juliette Daum. I live in Aberystwyth at the Black Lion.
Now then, I've got to start by saying this is probably one of the most interesting accents we've recorded in the series of 20 for this project. Give me the background of this wonderful accent, please.
Okay, I was born in Wisconsin, in the States, where I grew up till I was 16. And then I came to Europe and I lived in the Netherlands, France, Germany, England before I moved here to Wales. So it's not a pure American accent, although most people think I'm American. Sometimes people think I'm Irish. Someone thought I was French recently, so that's nice.
Okay, can we take you back to the beginning of your life, your interesting life, your before you've gone to all those other countries? Tell us a little bit about your childhood days.
So I was born in southern Wisconsin, near Madison, which is the capital, but in the countryside, near a small lake called Red Cedar Lake, in a log cabin that my father built. I grew up there until I was 7, but my mother died when I was 3, and that was a difficult time in my life. Of course, I didn't really process it as a 3-year-old. It's something that I have processed in different ways throughout my life and still do. So when I was 7, my dad found this school building that was going for sale, that was redundant because they made a new school in the town Ashland in northern Wisconsin, near Lake Superior, which is a really beautiful, fresh, clean lake, the biggest surface size freshwater lake in the world. And where I grew up was quite touristy. The Apostle Islands, and yeah, it's just really beautiful part of the world. And I lived there till I was 16. And my father had created this tradition in our family to that each one of us after high school we would go to Europe, because he did it when he was 19, and he created this tradition for all of my older sisters. All went to Europe, so I did as well, and I went to the Netherlands to study the concertina, as you do. Concertina, it's a small squeeze box. It's actually one of the very few instruments that was invented in England. There's only...
It's a bit like an accordion.
Yes, but small.
Do you have one here?
I do, yes.
You know what I'm going to ask?
Yes.
Go and get it.
Oh, God.
So how many years have you been playing the concertina then?
I don't play it that much anymore, but
Yeah.
I did play it quite seriously, I suppose, for about 10 years, from when I was 14 to early 20s. And yeah, it brought me all sorts of places.
So you've left the Wisconsin area to go to the Netherlands at the age of
16.
16.
On my own.
And this is as you've said, a bit of a family tradition, according to your dad, and that he did something quite similar.
Yeah, I graduated high school early, so that's why I was younger, a bit younger, young for my year, and then I graduated a year early. My dad had been living in France for the last year of my high school, because my sister, who's 3 years older, was studying in an accordion school in France, and so shortly after I moved to Europe, my dad and stepmom moved to France.
So whilst they were in France, who was looking after you in Wisconsin?
Well, my stepmother was still there for most of the time, and also my older sister, who's 12 years older than me, lived with us. But I'd say I was probably looking after myself.
I can well imagine you doing that. What was it like being left on your own, therefore, without your stepmother and without your dad? Your sister had already gone.
I have 3 older sisters. So my oldest one lived elsewhere, in Seattle with her daughter, and my sister, who was 12 years older than me, so she was 27 at that time. She lived with us, and she had a business that I helped her with, so the sewing business. And my stepmother was mostly there that time. I think she went for about a month or 6 weeks to France to see what it was like. And also my half brother was living with us at that time. But yeah, we had kind of a strange dynamic, I suppose, as a family. My dad had gone bankrupt when I was about 12, and he was selling airplanes from Eastern Europe to Americans. And unfortunately one got destroyed in the post, the freight crate transport, and that kind of ruined his
What kind of aeroplanes are we talking about here?
Small-ish aerobatic airplanes. I know one was a Yak 52. I remember that name. That's the only one I remember.
He was buying them from Europe, was he?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then importing
Poland and Russia.
Yeah.
And he only did it for a few years, from about when I was about 9 till 12. But when he went bankrupt, he put everything into my sister's name. My sister, who's 3 years older, 12 years older than me, so she was an adult. And so yeah, the dynamic of who was taking care of everybody and how the house was running was a bit strange for a time. My dad did find ways to make money. Like he shortly after that he started selling antiques on eBay. eBay was just starting at that time, so he loved antiques, and that's what he did in France when he moved there. So he did find some antiques in northern Wisconsin and sold them on eBay. One was an accordion, or a few accordions, and my sister, that's why she started playing, because he had found a nice accordion, and then she wanted to learn how to play it, because she had seen somebody play one on the Charles Bridge in Prague when she was 12 years old, living in Prague with my older sister, the same one who lived with us.
I think I saw the same accordion player.
Yeah.
on the bridge in Prague. It's a pretty memorable bridge, a memorable city as well, and you do see these street performers.
Mm-hmm.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so that's how I started playing the concertina, because my sister was having accordion lessons in Duluth, which was like an hour and a half drive, so my dad had to drive her 3 hours, total to go to the lesson. So he would wait for her, and the woman who gave the lessons had an accordion museum, and that's where he saw a concertina for the first time, and wanted me to learn it to help me train my ear, because apparently I was playing the violin out of tune.
So do you still have a violin here?
I do.
You have a violin and a concertina in this house.
I will absolutely not play the violin for you, but and I haven't played the concertina in months, so again.
So in terms of childhood and going up to the age of 16, what was living in Wisconsin like for you and that part of the world in terms of opportunities you had, experiences you can remember?
Well, I'd say one difficult thing of living in small town America and being at all different. For example, my mother had died, which is a very strange thing to a lot of people. They don't, that just seems strange. And unfortunately, that seems like a good reason to bully somebody. I don't know why anybody would think that, but any difference kind of sets people off. And then also my parents weren't married. They didn't have a traditional kind of job. They didn't go to church. All sorts of things that kind of made us weird. We lived in a weird old school building. I remember one time somebody was teasing me saying that we were actually ghosts that lived in an old school building. And so I went to Catholic school because it was a lot smaller, and the other school that they had made when our house was made redundant, our school building house, they had put everybody together from the three school buildings that were in the town, where there was an east one, a central one, and a west one, and they made a bigger one outside of town. So the classes were very big, like 40 students, and it wasn't ideal. And they also had just decided to put all special needs kids into regular classes as like an experiment to see how that would go. But then it meant that there was one teacher for 40 students with like 3 that had special needs, and there was just no way to really teach everybody. So I only went to that school for about a month, and then my parents took me out and put me in the Catholic school, which was a lot smaller classes, about 20. However, I was bullied horribly by students and teachers.
On the basis of
on the basis of just being different. I'm not entirely sure why the teachers did it, because you would think they were adults, but mainly my parents didn't go to church. I wasn't actually religious, although I tried to assimilate, and I got baptized. I chose to be baptized. So when you choose to be baptized when you're 9 years old, you choose funny things, like my baptism name is Romeo.
Your real name is
Juliette. Yes, so I was Juliette Esther Romeo Daum when I was baptized, because my parents said I could choose whatever I wanted, and then I did First Communion, as a but we went to church as part of the thing on Friday morning. We always had church, but it wasn't enough, because my parents didn't go on Sunday as well and take us. And not that I wanted to, it was just, that was something that you were meant to do to fit in. And so I did not have a good time in Catholic school.
Yeah, I get the impression this is a dark part of your life, which I can see has affected you. I can see in your pause, in your choice of words, and in your thought as well. You are thinking things through, so I appreciate you opening up there. I don't want to dwell on the dark side of anybody's life, and I'm not going to dwell on yours even as well. So let's catch that plane and leave that big continent, and let's get to the Netherlands. What was it like landing in the Netherlands? Can you just explain the word graduation as well? You said you graduated at the age of 16. What was the process? What did graduating mean in America as opposed to what graduation means here in the UK and in Wales?
I still don't quite understand the sixth form and all that. I don't really understand it. But in the States, you have high school, which is usually 4 years, from 14 to 18 years old, about. Like I said, I was already a year young. My birthday's in August, so I was the youngest in my class. And however, you only need it in Wisconsin. It's probably different in different states, but you need 24 credits, which if you take 8 classes a year, which was possible, you could do it in 3 years if you wanted to. It wasn't very normal to do, but I kind of wanted to be out of there.
So was I.
So I actually had like 24 and a quarter credit, because you can also do driver's ed, and that's part of your high school in school. Driver's education. So to learn how to learn the technical side of driving.
Good
So,
heavens, as part of school.
yeah, you can learn it in school because
Well.
yeah.
That's an idea for Wales.
Yeah, and there was one semester that I did 9 classes, because I did an art project that was an extra art project, because our school was putting on a play in one of the it's called Big Top Chautauqua. It's a huge tent in the middle of nowhere, and all summer long they have events and music, and like quite famous people come to, like Willie Nelson, I don't know, and come and perform there. And so they were going to have a play, so we like wrote a musical, and I did the art class, so I did the stage design, and we had like projections and stuff like that, so that was an extra class.
So let's pick a good thing out of that period in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this creative element developing in you, the musical element as well. Maybe not the violin, but the concertina, and I suppose the creative side, when we think about where you are today, is still there with you, because that's one of the reasons I know about you, and which is why we're here recording you. So you're leaving America with some qualifications that you can probably hopefully use.
Just typical high school diploma, like just the I don't know what you usually get at 18, I guess.
So you're leaving America at the age of
16.
16. Yeah. Boy oh boy, that is a big step for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I considered myself quite mature, although I probably wasn't. Probably compared to a lot of other 16-year-olds, I was. I had always had a lot. My 2 older sisters are 15 and 12 years older than me, and I was often trying to, be cool and be like them and be able to hang out with all of their friends and do what they were doing. So like the creative side was very much from my family, and also in the area. There were also great creative things in the area. There's a university in our town, Northland College, that is the top I forget words sometimes. Ecology, like college in all of the states. So they had a lot of interesting students. It's kind of a weird combination of the typical farmers from the area and then the hippies that were going to college there and walking around in the snow barefoot. And there were lots of interesting creative things happening. One summer I did several weeks, I can't remember how many, but of welding. So making sculptures in metal and welding them with my sister, who was 12 years older than me. So I did a lot with her. Yeah.
Let's jump on this plane then.
Okay.
To Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Who makes the decision to go to Europe? Yourself? Because your dad is already in France at this point.
Yes and no. It was kind of I always knew it was going to be what I was going to do. Whether it was what I was going to do in Europe was kind of a little bit up in the air. There was a time that my dad And I was quite interested in it because my dad was a musical instrument builder when I was a kid. He made lutes and harps and guitars, and he was also a musician with my mum who died, and he suggested once that I go at like 14 to go to Cremona in Italy to learn how to make violins, and I was quite interested in that, but I don't know why. It just wasn't really practical. It would have meant that I would have like only been a trade person. I wouldn't have had like any other education, which wasn't ideal, I don't think. But that was once an idea. However, there was a reason I wanted to stay in the States. I did really want to go into acting, and I won a scholarship to a La Crosse, which is a town in Wisconsin, their university, for acting, because I did a play that was competing, and got a bunch of awards for it. So I did really want to do that, but my dad didn't want me to, so I didn't. And I've tried to do a lot of different things as well since I came to study the concertina, but it didn't work out. So I studied art, and I tried to study acting. I did several small courses, and I tried to go to Hamburg musical college. I can't remember what it's called, and I could have, but it would have. I didn't have any money, so. Yeah.
So at the age of 16, you fly over on your own.
Yeah.
From.
Sorry,
from
I got
America.
a little bit carried away.
It's okay. You fly over to Amsterdam.
I flew to Paris.
To Paris.
My dad had gone back to the States to sort of wrap up everything for him to move to France. But my sister, who's 3 years older than me, was in France still. And she came to Paris and met me. And then we went to where she was living for about a month. And then I took the train to Tilburg in the Netherlands to meet my concertina teacher.
So how long were you there in the Netherlands for?
So I arrived July 2001, and I left in January. Let me think. 2005, I think. Is that right? Is that 3.5 years? Yeah.
So working and living there?
Tilburg.
Tilburg?
I lived in Tilburg for a year.
Yeah.
And then I moved to The Hague, which is where I studied art. And I did the work that you are allowed to do when you don't have a visa, that kind of work. So I sewed stuff, I made clothes for people, I made curtains, I babysat, I busked, so I played concertina on the street. I didn't have a visa because I came when I was I was 16, and then when I started school I was 17, because I turned 17 in August, and I went to the school and I had all the paperwork that I was accepted in the school, and I went to the place they told me to go to get my visa. I don't know what it was. It wasn't the American consulate, but they said, "Oh, you're a minor. You're under 18. You don't need a visa. You can just live here as a minor." And I was like, "Okay." But had I known that, what they didn't tell me, which had I known, I could have just asked for Dutch citizenship as a minor on my own in the country. I could have just said, "Can I have Dutch citizenship? I'm here alone. I live alone. I have nobody supporting me." And they, I don't know what the process would have been. I don't know if I would have had to give up my American passport or something like that. And I've never confirmed it, but I found it out after. So I didn't get a visa. And then when I needed one, you have to prove that you either have 700 coming into your bank account every month or 7,000 in your bank account, which I obviously could not do. So I just couldn't get a visa. But nobody had a problem really. So I was easily going back and forth between Netherlands and France, and nobody ever noticed.
Wow, I just had this vision of you on the run.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I just,
So
they never asked. I had
how
a bank
easy was it
account, I was in school, they just never asked.
So you were in school in Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
in an English language school?
Nope, in a Dutch school. For the thing is that a lot of there are so many people who are foreign in the Netherlands. I think about, it's like 40% of people in the Netherlands are foreign, so not Dutch, and that was probably pretty similar to what my class was. There were people from Venezuela, Colombia, Iran, Norway. This is when I was studying art, so it was a lot more difficult in the music school for the year I was there, because there was a lot more Dutch people in Tilburg. But in The Hague, there were, so they were happy to teach in English. So there were things in Dutch, but they kind of helped you.
Did you pick up any of the Dutch language?
A tiny bit. The Dutch kind of make fun of you if you try to learn Dutch. They're like, why would you even bother? And I had a Dutch boyfriend. I was with his family all the time, and they just totally happy to speak in English to me. They just, I listened to them, and I understand a little bit, but
the word I have in my mind is you are surviving in this country.
Yeah.
How did you survive in The Hague, and for a matter of 4 years, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, very carefully. I was very poor. My dad was sending me money, so he was selling French antiques on the internet to Americans, and that did work quite well for a while, until the war broke out, and then there was a lot of hatred towards French people because they didn't join the Iraq war. They didn't join in, and so they were calling them cheese-eating surrender monkeys. and people were destroying the things they were getting from my dad in the mail, and then it was bizarre. It was really, really bizarre. So that was harder after then. But before then, it wasn't. There wasn't much money, and there were certainly times I wasn't able to pay my rent. I remember one time having to get food with like pennies. I had pennies, and I got these like crackers that were really cheap, kind of like bread that had been sliced and then toasted, but really small, and tomato paste, and putting them on that's what I ate. And I would also make split pea soup and white bread, because it was like the cheapest possible thing I could make. So, and that was interesting.
You mentioned you had a Dutch boyfriend.
I did, yes. And in The Hague, they fed me a lot. That I survived because they fed me, and they were lovely. So I was at his house every day, and they fed me. And so I ate pretty well for a year with him and his family.
How did your time there prepare you for the rest of your life? And what influenced you?
Well, I can be very frugal when I need to be, but I don't really like to be, because it's not very fun, and it's interesting because for example, I have a script that I've written about somebody who lives on the street, and it's a strange thing. Like you see people who comment on people who are really poor, and they say, oh well, look, they've got a phone, they've got some luxury, or look, they're eating out, they're getting takeaway, I mean, they don't have a kitchen, you know, and people don't realize the tax on being poor, like and the idea that when you do have some money, you do want to enjoy yourself, because all the rest of the time you've been really struggling. And yeah, so it's a strange thing. I can be very frugal if I have to be. I can live on nothing for a short time, fine. I just, when I work hard and I make money, I like to enjoy it, because I think that's part of why we do it.
What were the highlights, therefore, of that 4-year period in the Netherlands?
The highlights. Oh God, my life is going to sound so depressing.
Let's hear it.
The highlights. Oh, okay. One of my favorite things that
you
I
graduated to start with.
I didn't. No, I wasn't able to finish because I couldn't continue. I couldn't support myself any longer. I had to stop. It was the last place that I lived in the Netherlands was actually the nicest place that I ever lived, because somebody I babysat for knew somebody who was on sabbatical and had left their apartment, so they had gone somewhere, and she arranged for me to live in it for free. And it was really nice, on this really nice street, very close to my boyfriend, who was now my ex-boyfriend, unfortunately. And like just the next street behind, and very close to the school, and that was great. But I really didn't have anything at that point. I basically only had the money that I got from them babysitting, and they didn't need me regularly enough. They were talking about having me as like a live-in nanny for a time, but their house wasn't practical to have another person living in it, because you had to go through their bedroom to the bathrooms. But it was spacious. It wouldn't have really worked.
So highlights?
Highlights.
Yeah,
so
let's pick one.
One of my so I like living there, but one of my favorite places in The Hague is called the I hope I don't get it wrong. I think it's called the Binnenhof, and it's a square pond right next to the Parliament buildings, and it has a little island in the middle with trees on it, and I just really liked it. And so one of my projects for my art school was making a little tiny boat that just I fit in, and so I first tested it in the canal in front of my school, as it was my final project for that year, and then I went into the Binnenhof and went around there, and I got not quite arrested, but I got told to come out by the police, because the people in the Parliament buildings noticed that somebody was in a little boat.
Probably the first and last person to
Probably.
do that. But it's a boat you made yourself, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I was.
You were testing to see if it worked.
Well, no, I knew it worked by then. I tested it in the canal in front of my school as my final project, because I wasn't sure if it would work, and if it didn't, I wouldn't have anything else. So I had to, I did it as like a little performance, me getting into the boat.
What did you make the boat out of?
Fiberglass. So I made a wooden mold, and filled it with smoothed it out with plaster, and I had worked out the exact volume of the boat plus a bit, versus for my own weight, basically, and it worked fine. It needed some runners to make it go straight, because it kind of wiggled around when you paddled it, but it worked, and I was very happy with it. Some of the plaster stuck to the fiberglass because I didn't really know what I was doing, but yeah, it wasn't as hard as you'd think.
Have you made any boats since?
I haven't, but I would like to.
Because we have a tradition in Wales of the coracle.
Uh-huh.
Don't feel further.
It was a little bit like a coracle. Yeah.
I'm imagining
yeah.
it.
It wasn't as cute. It was just one layer of fiberglass, basically. But
right, we've come to the end of our time there in the Netherlands. Where are we going next with you?
And then I moved to France to live with my dad and my stepmom, and I did go to the accordion school for a couple months, but unfortunately I wasn't able to continue because of finances. But yeah, so I lived with my dad and stepmom for about 2.5 years in France, in a tiny, tiny, tiny hamlet. Like you might think as Aberystwyth is small, but it is smaller. Um, and yeah, in their tiny house that that had been empty for about 30 years when they bought it. It didn't even have a toilet. It was super tiny, and I slept on a chair that folded out in the living room for a while, and then I was in the attic when it wasn't too cold or too hot because it didn't have any insulation. And there was a time, because I was in my early 20s, so I kind of wanted some privacy, but there was a time that it was so cold and I was living in the attic, but I wanted the privacy, that I built this like little tent out of sheets around my bed and had the little heater. I could heat it up, obviously not when I was in it, not when I wasn't in it because it was a bit dangerous, but I could heat up this tiny tent that I made over my bed in the attic. We were very poor.
Did you work therefore in France?
I busked. That's all I really could do because I didn't have a visa as well. And I helped my dad, so he sold antiques on eBay. And
at this point, you've still got an American passport.
Yeah, I still didn't. I did have a visa for 1 year when I lived in France. That was only because of the incredibly kind-heartedness of French people. They found a way to give us a visa. But again, there weren't any jobs in that area. I didn't have my own car. I didn't speak French well enough to have a job, but I could busk. I could help my dad. That's what I did. Yeah, and I was kind of. I recorded albums during that time as well. I made 3 albums with my dad, concertina. Yes, and my dad really wanted me to be a concertina player. He really wanted me to take over the world with concertina, which people don't care about the concertina. They are uninterested, and the problem was that I played classical music, and normally people play folk music on concertinas, which is great. You can then play with a band, you can go to sessions, you can do all sorts of things, but my dad hated folk music, and so he wanted me to play classical music. So I played classical guitar music on the concertina, which is pretty special, and when I look back on it, I was very good at it, but it doesn't feed you, and I was starving, so
What next do what we've got next now then?
So after that, I did the recordings. I made 3 albums with my dad, and he kept saying, "Oh well, you do this, and then get a different album, and then we'll promote you to the world." Right? Okay. And I was on the internet. I had YouTube videos, and there were people who were quite interested and amazed with what I could do on the concertina. And I eventually got invited to Germany to teach at a weekend concertina event. And they were going to pay me 450 euros. And that was a lot to me. and my trip. But they obviously didn't realize how poor I was, that they needed to pay me first to get there. So they said, "Oh yeah, we'll pay for your trip, just keep your receipt and we'll pay you for the weekend." So we only had enough money for a one-way ticket, because on a train it's it's double, it's one way there, one way back. It's not like a plane ticket that's that's more expensive for a one-way ticket. So I think it was something like 120 for a round trip, and it was like 60 for a one way to go to Frankfurt. And that's like all we had. So I went, and then I stayed in Germany and never went back. I did go back eventually, but I was done living with my parents, and I met somebody at the Concertina event who had a seminar hotel where they had lots of different events happening throughout the year, and he played the concertina, and I went back there, and I just stayed there. I just lived there, and I worked there in the kitchen, and I eventually was in a relationship with that guy, and it was a completely different part of my life, because it was the first time that I ever remember having financial security in my whole life. So
and what a journey, of course.
Yeah.
It's been one country after the other, and now you're in Germany.
Yep.
Feeling a bit settled, happy, I'd say.
Yeah, I felt happy. It wasn't a particularly healthy relationship that I was in, but I was with some really wonderful people. The people that I worked with in the kitchen were amazing, wonderful German people. I learned German really fast because I was, with these German housewives who were just really friendly, didn't speak much English, so, and they're very encouraging and helpful for me to learn. I traveled more than I had done ever, so my partner took me to the Canary Islands, and that was very different to a lot of my other holidays and experiences. Like, most of my child time holidays were my dad's work trips, so it was still him working, and then I was kind of like hanging around. And there were lots of really interesting groups, lots of music, dance groups, tango. They have a harp event, and that's actually how I know Harriet Iris. Do you know Harriet Iris, who plays the harp? She went there regularly. I didn't meet her there, but she started going about maybe a year or two after I left. And so when we bought this house, and she was going there regularly, the people who own that place were like, "Oh, there's somebody who comes plays the harp, and she lives right down the road from you, and she lives in Pontypridd." So it's like, when they're like, "Oh, sure, she lives close in Wales, but she literally lives right there." Yeah, so that was quite special.
It's a lovely little snippet of a story there, because Harriet Iris is pretty well known in these parts for
you should interview her
for harp playing. I've been encouraged to interview.
Definitely, she's great. She's great.
And she would have been with us yesterday at this event playing the harp, but I understood that she was booked elsewhere. But she has done a lot of work with us over the years in harp playing, and the enthusiasm and the smile and the warmth as well. And I think there's something about anybody who plays a musical instrument. You can feel the joy of that person just because they play an instrument.
Yeah, well, especially Harriet.
And especially, I think Harriet felt really pained to say no to me over the phone when I did ask her to come and play at an event with us yesterday.
I made a music video for Harriet. I've made quite a few for her now, but I made one for her a few years ago, and she looks so happy when she plays. She just looks radiant, and I sent the video to my sister, my oldest sister, and she said, "Wow, I don't think I've ever felt that happy in my whole life." It was just, which is sad, but also just it does highlight how happy she just seems when she plays. It's
So what
amazing.
a lovely connection there between your time in Germany and the fact that Harriet was going out to this harp festival, would you say it was?
Yeah, she went this year. It's like a harp weekend, so all harp players come and learn and play together. And there's a few harp makers in the area there in Germany.
And you mentioned your dad was a harp maker as well.
He did. He mainly made lutes, but he did make some harps as well. We would often go to Renaissance festivals when I was a kid, so dress up, and that was a great time in my childhood, going to Renaissance festivals in the summer, and yeah, playing.
Are we leaving Germany and coming to Wales next?
Well, we've got to go to England first.
Okay, let's leave Germany. Let's land. Let's land in England.
Okay, so in
of all places in the
Germany,
world to land.
Yeah.
I feel for you.
Yeah, sorry, I had to go to England first. So in Germany, I met my husband now, my current husband. He's from Sheffield, although his name is Rhys, so he's got a good Welsh name.
I was just about to say,
Yeah.
but he's called Rhys.
Yes. Yes. So I met him, and we kind of ran away together. And
You met him in England.
no, I met him in Germany, where I this place where I was living.
And what was Rhys doing in Germany?
He was doing a traveling work exchange thing. It's called woofing or ex-helping. I think that was the one that he was so ex and then help, that you exchange your help for a place to live and food, basically. So where I was living in Germany, they accepted these people because there was tons of things to do. So there was animals to take care of, there was work in the kitchen at all times, there was cleaning and just all sorts of stuff to do. But they also just liked company. They liked people that were there a lot, because it actually kind of would be a strange loneliness, because you'd have people in the summer, you'd have people all the time, so groups changing, but in the winter it was just the weekends basically, so all these people coming and then leaving and coming and then leaving. It was nice to have people who were there for longer that kind of stayed in the middle time as well. So Rhys came as a helper first in 2009, so I met him August 2009, and then he came back the following year in August 2010, and a couple months later we decided to run away together.
With a concertina, I'm sure.
I still had my concertina, yes. I still had my concertina.
So you ran away to
Sheffield. Run away to Sheffield, yes. Although we did come to Wales shortly afterwards. So we went to Sheffield, or near Sheffield, and then we went to the States for a few months, and to stay with my sisters in the house I grew up in, and we did some sewing and helped them, and just hung out for the summer, which was nice. And then we were actually at a youth hostel in Tenby, Wales, Tenby, Wales, when we found out our first child was on her way and going to join us soon in this world.
Why Tenby?
Well, Rhys always really liked Wales and came to Wales all the time as a kid on holiday, and I think they were just accepting people for helpers. So there was like, it was two. They had one position paid and one position that you could help and stay for free.
In the hostel. In
the hostel. So I did the help and stay for free, and because I was on a tourist visa. I've always had a visa for England and the UK because they do not let you come in if you don't. But yeah, because I was on a tourist visa, I couldn't be paid, but so Reese was paid, and I did the staying for free, and then noticed that the smell of the bitumen that they were using on the ceiling, on the roof, smelled particularly awful, and then did a pregnancy test.
Well.
Yes.
Bitumen.
Yes.
Would have thought.
Horrible smell anyway, but yes. So we found ourselves homeless, jobless, because we had been staying in Reese's mom's house because she had just moved in with her partner. And then she sold it while we were in the States. And obviously the job at the hostel was only for a few weeks. So we were pregnant, homeless, jobless, countryless, because I didn't have a visa. I did have one engagement. I was teaching concertina in October that year at the Whitby Concertina weekend, which is the most prestigious concertina event of, I don't know, the world maybe.
Is that in Yorkshire? Whitby?
Oh, sorry, I mean Whitney. Whitney. It's near... Where is that near? I can't remember where Whitney is. Kind of like between London and Bristol area, I think. Unless I'm completely mixing it up where it is. I don't know. It's a small place. And... which I was being paid for, so that was good, because money is good. But yeah, so we then had to sort out my visa. Reese had to get a job, which wasn't easy at that time, and I had to go back to Germany to apply for my fiancé visa, because we had to get married. There was no other way to be together in the same country if we weren't married. And luckily I still had my German visa, because I did have a visa in Germany as well, because I was properly working. Otherwise I would have to go to the States, and there's a lot more people applying from the States to come to the UK than there are from Germany. So luckily it was a lot faster and easier and cheaper, and I still had a place to stay because I was still good friends with people where I used to live in Germany. And yeah, so, and 1 year after our oldest was born,
Where was the oldest born?
In Halifax. So we had to live with Reese's mum and her now husband, but partner at that time. Luckily they had a big house, not quite big enough, but they were very generous and very helpful, and but obviously had their own opinions about what we should be doing, because when anybody helps you, they seem to think that they still should have opinions about what you should do, because they think if you end up in need of their help that you're somehow unable to take care of yourself. But we just obviously were in the position of having a baby on the way and needed to sort ourselves out. But yes, she was very helpful by saying she was financially responsible for me, for my visa. So she didn't actually pay anything. We actually paid rent to live in their house, but just saying that you will be financially responsible for somebody on the visa means you can actually get a visa, which means you can properly live in a country, which means you can work and you can do all sorts of other things. But so we then moved into our own place that we rented right after Indy was born. My oldest daughter was born, and a year after that we started our business making baby wraps. And baby wraps are a long woven piece of cloth. We had them woven very near where we lived, in a place called Slowett, although it looks like it's called Slaithwaite. So a Yorkshire mill that was still running, making really beautiful cloth. And so we did our own designs, and they wove them for us, and I sewed them. And because it was such an in-demand product, our business just took off immediately. And I knew it would be because I was using baby wraps that my sister had given me, and for Christmas that year I wanted to buy my own. So I was like, okay, I want my own baby wrap because I loved them. I loved using them, and I wanted to choose my own because my sister had chosen them and given them to me and sent them to me. And so I picked this really beautiful one that was green with like ivy leaves on it by this company called Osha that in Scotland. And they were the only baby wrap company at that time in all of Europe. Not all of Europe, sorry, all of the UK, and there's only one other one in Europe at that time. Maybe two. Two in Germany, I think. And so I said, Reese, they sell out really fast, so I need you to like buy it for me. Wait on the computer, and as soon as they're there, you buy it for me and get it. And I said they sell out really fast, so you have to. He's like, yeah. I said no problem, and they all sold out in 10 seconds, and we didn't get one. And we kind of realized that with our skill set and what we had available, we already knew of the place that did weaving nearby. We said, and this was when our oldest daughter was about 7 months old, so we started this planning, and then actually started the business about 6 months after that. And we sold out immediately, every single thing we did. And after about 4 months, Reese was able to quit his job and help me, and we are now sitting in the house that Raps bought. So
thank the Lord for Raps.
Yes. So it was a lot of work because I sewed all of them, and I had a small baby, and then we had another baby, which meant I had to start working when our second baby was about 10 days old. So luckily it was in a house, so I was only in the next room, but it was very stressful. And I had sewed like crazy before she was born to get as many as I could made beforehand, but they sold very fast, and people are demanding, they want the new thing, so we had to stay on top of it.
This is in Halifax.
This was in Sheffield. Yes. So when we moved to our own place, it was near Sheffield, where my husband grew up, Penistone, and then we were living in Stocksbridge, which is a little bit closer to Sheffield, before we moved here. So
when did the thoughts of moving to Wales start emerging?
I think always, from the point we were in Tenby, really found out about Indy. We had thought about moving to the States, but we wanted to be more independent, do our own life, whereas if we had gone back to the States, it would have been very much living with my sisters and doing their business and being part of their thing. So when we decided to stay in the UK, obviously we had to go with what was available, which was Reese's mum's house, and then we rented our own place. Reese's job was in Sheffield, so close to Sheffield, but we always wanted a house with a garden, and Reese's dream at that time was to build his own house. So he had helped quite a few other places with house building projects. So he really wanted to build a what are they called? A straw bale house. So that was kind of a dream at that point, to get land and build a house. And my dad had built his own house, so that was kind of like, I was into that. But it would have been very impractical with 2 small children and trying to run a business. So we bought one instead that was already made.
This one,
yeah.
So the process of deciding where to move in Wales,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to let us know.
Okay, so this was
in?
by the time we were able to get a mortgage, because you have to have like 3 years of books, I think, 1 year self-employed. I think to show, plus, you have to have a certain amount of down payment. So by the time we were able to start looking for a house to actually buy, was right when the Brexit vote was. And we were obviously not Brexiters, so we were wanting to not be in England, really. So there was we'd always sort of thought about Wales anyway, to be, I wanted to be closer to the sea because I grew up on the lake, but we also considered Scotland because of Scotland's position on leaving the UK to join Europe again. We're like, maybe we'll go up there. And so we did look in Scotland at a couple places, and we looked at a few other houses in Wales. We actually looked at places to rent earlier as well, because once we started the business, we were like, well, we could do this anywhere. So we had looked at a few places to rent in the years beforehand, but it was just not very practical and scary. It's renting some place is kind of scary. What if the business dropped, and then what else can you do in the countryside? But after a few more years, we were basically looking everywhere on Rightmove, from like north through to the west of the coastline, and we just found this house, and I immediately loved it, partially because it was called Black Lion, which is very cool, but the garden is amazing. It's like a fairyland with this beautiful little stream that goes through, and it just felt like completely one in a million of a place to find. It was not great inside. There was a lot of work that needed to be done, both inside and outside. The garden was very overgrown and brambles everywhere. You couldn't see how wonderful it all was, really, because you couldn't go most of the places in the garden because there were so many brambles. So like across the stream there, all of that up to the fence with the house next to it was all brambles, like 6 foot high. And so now we've made it into a little orchard, and so I absolutely loved it immediately, and I said I want to go see the house and stay overnight so that we can actually see what the area is like as well. So we stayed in a B&B in Aberystwyth. I think it's closed now, but it was very nice and clean, and they were super friendly, and so we came to see the house.
Was that Mice Glass?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, it has closed down, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because we used to work a lot with, I think it was Peter White.
Yeah.
Who ran it with his wife as well, and it was built on a site of a former chapel, if I remember correctly. And somebody was telling me the other day, when on the day the chapel was closing for the final time, hundreds of people turned up there for a bit of a concert, and it was as if people were saying, where has everybody been until now, because the chapel was closing, because people weren't going there.
Yeah.
So you stay there, and you've got your eyes on the Black Lion in Aberystwyth.
Yes. So we came and we saw the house with the estate agent.
Do you remember who the estate agent was?
Is it John Rowe Rees, I think? Or I think it was Charles something Rees. Charles Raw Rees?
Raw Rees,
yeah. I think his name was Charles, who showed it to us. But I think the estate agent is called John Rowe Rees, but I think, yeah. So he showed us the house at about 2:00 in the afternoon. So we had, the rest of the evening to kind of hang out. And we asked them if there was any place to eat, and he said, I think there's a cafe down the road. So we went to the CUPHAT, that is now the tea shed, but on the other side of the road. So Sharon, who had the CUPHAT at that point, now has it on the other side of the road. She'd be a good person to interview as well. So, and it was just such a friendly place. and we met so many people in the area in the Cwtch, and so we met somebody who lives in New Row, Janice. I don't know if you know her, but and she just talked to us for 3 hours and told us all about the area, all about the people, how artistic and interesting people are, how friendly everybody is, which is true. And when Reese had first seen the house, he was like, "Oh my God, there is so much work. We can't, no, we can't have this house."
Do you remember what the house was on the market for?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me?
170.
170.
Yeah.
And which year was this? 2018.
2016.
2016.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might have been 275, and then we offered 270, and then they took 270, but then somebody offered 280 after we were already in the process of buying it, and very luckily the owners decided to stay with us. So they actually asked the estate agent, "Who do you think will respect the integrity of the house more?" And the estate agent said us. So. And we're good friends with the people who used to own the house, because it was in their family since it was built, so they feel very strongly about it and they really loved it. But none of them needed to live in it. They all live other places. So
clearly, with a name like Black Lion,
mm-hmm.
It's not just a house, is it?
No, yeah, it used to be a pub.
One of many pubs, I'd say, in Aberystwyth and Pontry de Croes, because. We're in the middle here of the lead mining
mm-hmm.
catchment area of the Cambrian Mountains. A lot of mining heritage still
mm-hmm.
available to see here. We've got lead mines everywhere. I know
mm-hmm.
we followed each other the other day when we were going up to Glogvawr
mm-hmm.
lead mine up there. It's one of my little favourite sneak up places as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I have an hour to kill at lunchtime, it is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The remains of the lead mine industry, whilst they can be seen as scars on the landscape, of course, have a little bit of beauty attached to them as well, especially that little pond, that little lake up there. You can just sit there and wait for something to arrive and land, and the horses.
Mm-hmm.
So you've really have picked a really good place here, haven't you?
Yeah,
You've been really lucky.
Yeah, we have. Yes, we have.
Given the journey we've had all the way from Wisconsin
mm-hmm.
To Aberystwyth. And again, like I said, it's not just a house. It's a former pub.
Yeah.
What heritage do you know? What history do you know about the building?
Yeah. So the person who built it, or got, I don't know what you'd say, funding from the brewery, was called John Messer, and I think he was Cornish. I think it's from Cornwall, and then his daughter was called Lydia, because that's my sister's name, and she married into the Evans family. So then it was the Evans the rest of the time. So the original John Messer, then his daughter was Lydia Messer, and then she married somebody Evans, I can't remember.
Do you know when the building was built?
Yes, 1861.
Any indication of that date on the property?
Yes. So we have the original deed that the owners gave us, but also when we were... Oh, wait to talk. I'm moving away. So when we did construction inside and we took down these walls that were really, really horrible, they weren't holding up anything. They were just this really rickety wood. But underneath the floor, we found this penny. And so there's, I guess it's a tradition of putting a penny under the foundations of a house of the year that it's built. So it's 1861 penny. We already knew it was 1861, but another confirmation is our penny. So we hang it just on the wall, just above where we found it.
Yeah,
yes, we framed our penny. It seemed too sad to put it back in the dirt underneath. So that's our house penny.
What does it feel like to live in a place called Aberystwyth? You've lived, since 2016.
Yeah. Well, I used to call it Isbidiestwyth.
I'd say you call it lots of things over
Yeah.
the years.
Yes. Our kids used to call it Spitty Whiff Whiff. But then, yes, I learned that it's supposed to be Isbidiestwyth.
Who confirmed that to you? Do you remember who might have
I think
helped you with the pronunciation?
I think it was our neighbour, who just on the other side. She's Welsh.
Who's that?
Cheryl and Dave. Cheryl, what's their last name? Kelly. Cheryl's Welsh. She's from Dugethley, and I think that she is the one that told us that it was Isbidiestwyth, not Isbidiestwyth. So I think a few of the English people around still call it Isbidiestwyth. Or Spuddy.
Yeah, Spuddy, like Pontry Vendigide.
Yeah.
Is Bont for many, of course. Right, so you're here, 2016. 2 children.
Yes.
1 husband.
Yes.
Rhys.
Yes.
How do you settle in Isbidiestwyth? What have you got mapped out?
Oh, well, first of all, our oldest was just ready for school. So we did look at Bont and in Devil's Bridge, but at that point, Bont was like oversubscribed. So they suggested we go to Devil's Bridge, which we actually kind of preferred the school there anyway. And even though it's the same headmaster, it was made hardly any difference. But I really like Devil's Bridge. It's a really lovely little village, and the school is amazing. And even though we're a tiny bit closer to Bont, we tend to go towards Aberystwyth more often, so it's more on our way if we're going somewhere or coming back. And
Of course, what we have to remember here is you're practically next door to the old school here.
Yes,
in Isbidiestwyth.
that would have been convenient. Yeah.
Did you ever discover anything about Isbidiestwyth school in terms of curiosity? Because you've mentioned previously that your dad, you lived in an old school, didn't you?
Yeah.
So somebody here now clearly lives.
Yeah, well, we know the people who live there and have been inside and seen a lot of the work that they've done, which was a lot. They really modernized it. I wouldn't have modernized it as much, in my opinion. As you can see from our house, we stripped everything back so we could see, like, this was all boxed in. The stone fireplace was all hidden behind plasterboards, and so we rediscovered the old. I like the old, so I wouldn't want to cover it up. It's kind of a pity because the floor, which was underneath, well, first of all, the most horrible carpet you could imagine in your life was on the floor. It looked like camouflage vomit.
So we're talking about the black lion here now.
This is our floor in our house.
Yeah.
So, and we lived with that horrible carpet for a few years. There were so many different patterns in this room. It was very funny. So there was like flower wallpaper, like a couch and a chair with 2 different flowery patterns on. The curtains had different patterns. The floor was that camouflage vomit. It was every kind of different pattern in this room. It was crazy. But underneath this, it's just beautiful big slate tiles, but they're quite uneven and cold. Slabs,
yeah.
Just big slabs. So like the fireplace, but then bigger on the floor. But they are quite uneven, and it's kind of cold because they're just flat onto the dirt underneath them. So I would have loved to have it open, but it's not that practical with kids and wanting to be cozy and stuff like that. So
you've made it a home.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to what it used to be, a pub, therefore a business.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that coin, did you find any other indication that this place was a pub when you moved in?
No, because it had been a house for about 70 years already. So the people we bought it from, their parents had made it into a house from a pub. And so they had lived in it um, until they both died. And the man we bought it from is now in his 80s. I think he was early 80s or late 70s when we bought it. And he lives in London. One of his sisters still lived in Devil's Bridge, but she died last couple years. And they he himself didn't actually live in this house. His younger sister did, because I think he was over 18 and was off on his own, but obviously it was his parents' house, so he came to it, and then they used it as a holiday house in between the time when their parents died and they sold it. So it was about 15 years that all of the family kind of came here on holiday.
Do you know how long this place was a pub for?
So I'm not exactly sure when they changed it, but I'm guessing they changed it around 1950s to 60s. I think they changed it into a house. So at least 100 years. So I'm guessing, yeah.
So how are you making a living now then? Once you've arrived here in the Black Lion, Aberystwyth, you've got 2 children, you've got 1 husband. What have you got mapped out? Because I'm feeling that you're going to settle here. You're not going to go to another country.
No,
you're not going to start thinking visa somewhere else.
No, this is home forever now.
This is home now forever, isn't it?
And I'm a citizen now, so no more
You're a
visas.
citizen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Of Wales or?
Of Wales, yes. I did my citizenship in Wales, so therefore I am a naturalised Welsh person.
How do you make a living? Because you've talked about your struggles, the poverty element of your life early on. How do you settle in so many ways here now in Aberystwyth?
Yeah, so when we came, our business was still in full swing. We were very busy. It was a trick to move because we were so busy. We actually they accidentally turned off our internet when we first moved in, and then they couldn't turn it back on for 4 weeks, which meant that, and there's no phone signal here, so it meant that I had to climb up the hill behind our house to get phone signal in order to do our business. So to post on Facebook and to answer emails and stuff like that. But also when I moved, I rented part of the building down in Pontrydd y Groes from Sharon. So we had met her at the Cwch, and I said I need a studio that I can work with right away, because the house, I could not have put a studio in the house. We had so much work we needed to do to make it livable. We actually all stayed in one room for the first few months while we were trying to do some other things, because one thing that was the reason we offered a bit less was there were styrofoam ceiling tiles on every single ceiling except for 2 rooms in the whole house, which are a fire hazard. So if there's a fire, they melt on top of you, and molten plastic is not very nice to fall on you. So we had to scrape all of that off, and yeah, it was a lot of things that needed to happen in the house to make it kind of livable. The kitchen was horrible. That was the first thing we did, was the kitchen. Just getting rid of all the moldy crap was, yeah. Anyway, so I rented part of the building down at Sharon's as a studio for about a year, until we built the little cabin that's in the woods now. Then I moved the business into there. So luckily there was internet down there, and I was working a lot to get the money in.
So still selling
baby wraps.
Baby wraps.
Yes, baby wraps. Lots and lots of baby wraps.
Can you explain to me? I've been puzzling what a baby wrap is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what a baby wrap is?
It's a carrying device, so a way to carry your baby by strapping it to your body, so on your chest, on your hip, or on your back. So there's lots of different ways to tie it. It's like a long towely blanket kind of thing that have lots of different ways of tying, and people learn and teach them, and it's just a really comfortable, snuggly way to hold your baby, and it's very beautiful. Lots of different colors and fabrics, and people like that as a kind of fashion thing as well. But also, that first year that we lived here, I started my second business, which is Oak Wren Studio, where I made cloaks, capes, ponchos, as something to move on from when you were no longer carrying your baby. Because a lot of people, babies grow, then you know your kind of hobby of collecting wraps is pointless because you're not carrying your kid anymore, but you still love the fabrics. So something that these customers could keep buying and appreciating the new fabrics. So we'd make new fabrics, new colors all the time, and so that did pretty well. I was able to do more and more of that, and not as many wraps when I felt like
has
it.
the wraps part of your...
That's closed now.
That's closed.
That chapter has closed because our babies grew up. We weren't really in that environment anymore, and I decided I wanted to do something else. So after studying what my dad wanted me to study, not being able to finish art school, not being able to choose my own path, I decided that I wanted to go back to university, and Aberystwyth University was just on our doorstep. So in 2019, October, I got my citizenship, finally, after a hellish journey with visas. And that was Thursday, and on Monday I signed up to university and started filmmaking course. So it meant having my citizenship meant I could get a grant to study, and I could get a student loan, which meant that I could actually do it for the first time in my life.
That was I can see some sort of relief in your face there, really, and and again happiness in that smile, because
it really meant so much to me to be able to do it. And so my first year was then interrupted by COVID, which was extremely depressing for me because I felt like I was finally doing this thing, and then yet again not being able to do it. But luckily I was able to persist. I did take 1 year off in between to let COVID kind of pass out of our system, so we didn't have all the restrictions, which luckily, so this last year I've just finished now, we haven't had any COVID restrictions, and we're able to study as normal, which was a very big relief. So yeah, it was a huge thing, I think, for me to accomplish during that time. Older, 2 kids, still running my business. The first year I was still making baby wraps in the first year, and then I decided I continued making the ponchos and capes, but I decided I needed to wrap up the wraps because it was very demanding with admin and emails, and every time you have a new colorway, a new cloth, you have to take pictures, and our youngest is still quite small, but still was like, taking pictures with a 5-year-old is a bit silly, and it was too much to try to also organize other people with babies, and we did have a decline in the business slowly since Brexit, because almost all of our customers were European. So Germany, Hungary, Sweden, France, Italy were our biggest customers. So it was harder for them with customs and things like that. So
it's the end of the wraps then?
End of the wraps. Still making ponchos as long as I need to, until I can make enough money making films.
What was it like doing this filmmaking course in Aberystwyth University, and what did they teach you? What's prepared you for the rest of this very interesting life I'm sure you're going to have?
Yeah, it was great. It was great because they taught me all the technical things from the start, which is good because, you know, sometimes you're really meant to have a background in it before you start it, but I have a little bit, but more acting than all of the technical things. And I was really, really happy to learn, you know, sound and editing, which I hadn't had any personal experience in doing that, and camera, getting, you know, comfortable with a proper video camera, and they have all the facilities, and yeah, it was great. It was coming to it as a mature student. I was able to like really concentrate on it, and it was just a bit of a pity that there weren't any more mature students, because, you know, the level of dedication that you put into something when you're older, when you've really decided this is what I want to do, is different to when you're 20, you know. There were some great students though as well, and I was lucky to nab those ones to be in my group that were really hardworking.
And the lecturers, they were good?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they changed quite a bit throughout the years. I think that it's maybe harder to get people to come and then stay in Aberystwyth. I don't know why. Like, it's amazing. But yeah, there was a bit of a cycle and change with the teachers. I wish they could have kept some of the good ones that they lost, though we did get some good ones as well.
You've just finished your course.
Mm-hmm.
Soon to be graduating with
with the first class honours. Yes.
Llongyfarchiadau. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I do follow you on social media, so I know that you've got a big memorable day ahead of you for you and your family as well, and quite an achievement with everything you've been through with your life. What do you hope to achieve with this first class honours degree from Aberystwyth University, given that you live in the Black Lion in Ysbyty in the Cambrian Mountains?
Yes, well, I know everybody thinks that all of the big opportunities are in the city. However, I've always been somebody who's made my own opportunities, and if you go to the city, there's thousands more people trying to get those same opportunities. So I don't actually think there's any difference. Yes, there's people already doing things there, but if you're going to be the person doing things, you can do it anywhere. So I'm writing. I'm currently applying for funding for my next short film. That I luckily, as a alumni, you're able to use a lot of the facilities and work with the university still, so they allow you to borrow the equipment. My next film, I'll need a place to build a set, because it's part of the film is set inside of a spaceship, so I need I need to build a cockpit. It's only small, but I've already talked to some of the teachers, and they're happy for me to build it there.
Can I ask, is your dad still alive?
No, he died less than a month after we moved here, and actually there are some nice stories about that as well. My dad was very excited to hear that we had bought this old pub, and he loved old buildings and old things, as you can probably tell from his antique loving time, and so there were so many wonderful French antiques that my dad was like, I can't believe people got rid of this. You know, he would get things in like charity shops for nothing that were, you know, like hundreds of years old, and so when we told him that we'd bought this house and sent the pictures and everything, he was like, oh, I have furniture for you that you have to have. I've got this furniture for you. And then he sadly died within less than a month of us moving in. He'd been sick, but it was sudden because he'd been managing for so long. He had diabetes probably for most of his life. But only found out in his 50s, so was only able to start managing it then. And then he had a heart attack, but then he got a pacemaker, and so he had been doing okay. But it was quite sudden that he died.
The reason I was asking that because of his expertise probably in the aeronautical world of aeroplanes, and I was thinking he could go up a level into spaceships and
I'm sure
acquire
he
some
would have.
sort of so tell me a little bit more about this spaceship film.
Yes. Okay.
Short film,
Short
or
film.
something in the style of Star Wars.
Probably more Star Trek than Star Wars, even though I'm not really a Star Trek fan. There's another show called The Orville, which is kind of based on Star Trek, but I find it a lot more entertaining. So I was watching it and I thought it must be so much fun to like be on the set and just doing this, and I'm like, it's like playing spaceships. And I was like thinking about playing as an adult. It is very difficult to engage in imaginative play as an adult. Like if you play with your kids, it's hard to just come up with stories and just make stuff up, which was so easy for me before. The older you get, it's harder. When you listen to a kid play, they just make stuff up. It doesn't even have to make sense, and they don't care. They just keep going and going and going. So I had this idea of 3 adults who get together to play spaceships, and I used to play spaceships with my friend when I was a kid, and we would climb up a tree, and the tree was our spaceship. And so in this story, it starts that you think it's like a sci-fi TV show. You don't. Hopefully, if we get enough funding, we'll make it look good enough that you might think it's just people in spaceships. But then it turns out they're just normal people on regular Earth, and their thing is they play spaceships on the weekends. So one of them has an old caravan in their garden, and they all get together on the weekend and they play. And as soon as they go into their spaceship, it's perfect, high-tech, a super cool spaceship and hopefully we'll get some good green screen with all the comets flying by and stuff like that. But on the outside is just a beat up rusty old caravan where they play. So that's my story. It's just a short film, so it's just.
Where are you thinking of filming this?
Well, the spaceship we're hopefully going to be able to build on the university property somewhere. Otherwise just in house. If you know anybody who's got a caravan in the backyard, that would be helpful. So
there's one in the car park in Tregaron at the moment.
Right, yeah.
What is it? Looks like it's been left there, by the way, which is why I'm referencing it. But yes, there are people with caravans.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, would you consider using the Cambrian Mountains landscape? For example, some of these old lead mines, they do look like otherworldly places, planets.
Yeah, I haven't written that they go to any planets. It certainly could be a possibility, and I've used the landscape in almost every one of my films because I love the landscape here. But
can you tell me about some of your other little films then, which you've written and used the landscape as a bit of an inspiration and as a well, like a bonus really to the script you've probably written and the idea you've had?
Yeah, so my final film for university is called Ode to Moss. So it's about a young actor who tries out for a part in as Hamlet. He doesn't get it because he's not a very good actor and he's not very developed as a person. And the teacher and the director says, go get some life experience, like go into nature, like get in touch with nature and yourself and stuff like that. So he goes. We did a few shots in Birmingham, set up the city thing, but then the indoor city shots are in Aberystwyth, and then he comes here. So he's walking over the hills in Dyfed pools. He is just down here in the woods behind Pontre de Grace. He's in my garden. So he ends up meeting Mother Nature and has a bit of soup at her campfire, which we did in our garden. But I love Dyfed pools. I've used Dyfed pools in another one of my films, and it's just so beautiful and so desolate. Like you can't see any houses around. You can feel like you're completely completely alone.
Any other? I'm just going to go because you mentioned tiny pools there. What is your favourite place to be at in the Cambrian Mountains? You mentioned tiny pools there. Any other places which?
Hafford Estate. We got permission to film on the Hafford Estate, which was really lovely and lucky. It's beautiful. I love the Hafford Estate. Everywhere there. And just our garden. I love our garden.
Yeah, and I was going to come to your garden as well, because as somebody who's actually walked through your garden, because there's a public right away there.
Yeah.
Which for anybody anywhere in the world to buy a house with a public right of way is a bit of a.
I know. We thought, oh, this is strange. This is weird. We'll have lots of people walking through our garden, but hardly anybody uses it. So, and it's kind of nice. We mustn't
say too much about it then.
It's kind of nice when people walk through. I mean, they always feel a little bit strange because you basically have to walk through our driveway and walk past our car, and so they feel a bit like, oh, is this okay? But no, it's quite nice to see people walk through, because it's so rare. It's not like it's ever been a problem, or people some people did a Easter egg hunt the first year we were here in our garden, which was a little bit strange. But
it's your garden after all, and it's your land. The land has come with the property of the Black Lion. But you mentioned earlier the stream that comes through here. It when it's rained quite significantly. It's like a succession of little waterfalls, and it's very fairy-like. It's very calming to be at. And I know from a personal experience of walking up there, just thinking, what am I going to see next? So, in terms of Ysbyty Ystwyth, Pontrhydydd Groes, and this part of the Cambrian Mountains, what do you think about tourists coming here?
I think that anything, like where I grew up was also touristy. I think you just want people to be respectful, and it's a beautiful place. How could you possibly, keep it to yourself? It's beautiful. It's wonderful, as long as people pick up after themselves and they don't make, lots of noise, and they don't, they're respectful of the nature. I think we have to share it with everybody, and it's great. I think it's a little bit, maybe a little bit more difficult for places that are very, very busy, like Snowdonia or the Brecon Beacons. I know that when you drive through there's like just cars all along there to climb up that one place, and sorry, I forgot the new Welsh name for it. The Brecon Beacons.
Banau Brycheiniog.
That one.
And that one place is Penafan.
Yeah, and the Snowdonia is also.
Which is why all those cars are there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that one. Yeah.
So have you climbed the nearest highest peak to your house? I haven't yet. Pimlimon?
My kids have.
Yes.
I think
who?
with you.
Yes, that was one incredible day of taking 48 school children from Ysgol Sir John Rhys, Ponterwyd, Ysgol Mynach and Ysgol Gymunedol Pontrhydydd, when the head teacher, who is in charge of these schools, Mrs.
George.
Mrs. Joyce George, when she asks you something, it's very difficult to say no.
Yeah.
And then of course you have to start planning and preparing and realising you've got not just children and a mountain, we've got adults and a mountain as well. It was a good day, it was a memorable day, and most of all it was a safe day as well. So you must get up Pimlimon soon. Where's the best place to go, park and walk up? Because I'm not really sure. Well, my favourite place is to go up to the Nantamorch Reservoir. So you go to Ponterwyd, you've been to Ponterwyd, haven't you? And then you go through the village, and there's a little sign that says Nantamorch as you're driving towards Llangurig on the A44, and you turn up there, and then you carry on going and going and going and you keep on going, and civilization disappears, so you more or less pass where the school is, and a little housing estate, a couple of farms, and then the farms end, and it's fields and slopes, and there's several little lakes up there, Highland cattle, and there's a couple of cattle grids, so watch out for the cattle grids, because that's one of them. You need to turn right and then head down to the far end of the reservoir and park up there. And there's a little stream called Maetsnant, and there's a little bungalow there. You can park by the little bungalow and then just follow the stream more or less then all the way up to Pimlimon Fach, which is the smaller of the two peaks. And when the stream finishes, in fact, you get to the source of the stream. It bubbles out of the landscape right by your feet, and you can hear it, you can see it, and you can sometimes smell it because it's quite peaty there in terms of the smell of the soil. And then right in front of you then there are two steep sections to climb from where the source of that little stream is. There's a big stone there as well, so you can sit on the stone for a minute and contemplate the next part of the journey. But there are two steep sections to the summit. The summit is a bit of a plateau, it's flat, the summit is, and it's got several stone cairns, Bronze Age stone cairns and a trig point there, and they've created little shelter out of some of these stones. But when you get there, you realise you've got to a very special place because there's nobody else there. That's how special it is. It's quite a secret place, really, compared to some other mountain peaks in Wales. You can see the whole of Wales from there. When you're so central, geographically central, on a map, you know, you're more or less at the geographical centre of Wales, in this part of Wales at least, and you can see to the east, you can see the Banau Brycheiniog, you can see Pen y Fan, where all the cars are parked. You can see down to Pembrokeshire, Sir Benfro, to the Preseli Mountains. See the full sweep of Cardigan Bay up to North Wales, Ynys Môn, Pen Llyn, Ynys Enlli, Bardsey Island. You can see Arwyddfa, Snowdon, formerly known as Snowdon, and the whole of Eryri, formerly known as Snowdonia as well. And then you can look up to the industrial part of North Wales, to the Wrexham area, North East Wales. You can see several lakes, quite a bit of bird life up there, quite a few skylarks, the occasional chough with its strange call. Maybe you'd be lucky to see a red kite, but it's just being there. It's very windy, by the way. It's very windy.
Did you go there this morning for solstice?
No, I went to the new stone circle.
Oh,
I was the only one who turned up.
In Tregaron?
I was determined to get up this morning I got up at 4 actually. I was quite excited about going into the middle of this brand new stone circle and sitting on the major main stone in the middle, waiting for the sun to rise, but the cloud cover was just ridiculous.
We built a stone circle in our garden.
Did you?
It's not like lined up with anything.
Isn't it? Well, we did when the community built the stone circle last year in Tregaron. They asked me for some advice in terms of which stones should they place in terms of sunset and sunrise on the longest day of the year, the 21st of June. Hil Ro'r Haf, as we say in Welsh, summer solstice in English. So I was there just waiting, but we'll have to wait now another year. What's the best thing about living here?
Best thing about living here? I just love living here. I don't think there's one best thing. I like everything. I really like Aberystwyth as a town. I like being able to go to the sea, but I like being here up in the mountains a bit on our own. And when you were talking about Pumlimon, I remembered I did the race to the sea a couple years ago.
Did you?
Yeah, so you start in Clongurrig and you go all the way to Aberystwyth, all through the valley. It's amazing.
Kept that quiet.
That is a good way to look at the landscape. That's really nice. I made a little tiny video about it. So that was right when I just started university. So
How did you plan and prepare for the race to the sea?
Well, I thought Oh my god! So I'd done quite a few half marathons, and that was quite a good distance for me. I was confident with half marathon. I like 10 miles, 10 to 30 miles. That's fine. That's good. Though I don't run anymore. I've kind of stopped during lockdown and never picked it up again. But maybe I'll start again. But so I was running a lot. And I thought, oh well, if I do Race to the Sea, that's 30 miles. So I should do a marathon in order to prepare for it, which was stupid because it was completely unnecessary. But I had a lot of pressure from my running group to do a marathon because I was pretty fast at 5K, and they thought, oh well, if you can run 5K at that speed, you should be able to do a marathon in under 4 hours. And so I had this like in my head, I've got to do this. So I had signed up for the Wales Marathon, which is in Tenby. So you start in Tenby and then go somewhere and then run back to Tenby. But there are a lot of hills in that marathon, and I did not realize how many hills there are because I've been doing a lot of my practice by running from here to Aberystwyth, which is 14 miles, and that was part of the Race to the Sea. Is once you get on, so I would go from here down the river road, which is now closed, and then get onto the bike path that was the train path, I guess. So through Clonella and then over to town. But that's all downhill. So I didn't do enough long distance with hills in my training. So the Tenby Marathon killed me. But then the Race to the Sea, I just walked. So basically I knew, okay, if I'm going to run a long way or I'm going to go a long way, I'll just walk. So I walked most of it, just jogged a few little places, and then I ran the last 3 miles because I was so cold by the end of it, and it rained and it was soaked through. So so I started off, you start before dawn, so that's really nice. You see the sun coming up over the hill. So you miss a bit of the landscape of the first bit because it's dark. But then I just had a pack full of sandwiches and was with my friend, and we just were walking most of it, jogged a little bit, and then when we got here, because you go through Pointe de Grace, Reese met me, and I changed my clothes and my shoes, and I thought, oh, I'll be fine. I won't need like my coat and everything, because I had set off with my coat because it was before dawn in October, and then it poured rain right after we left, so it was soaked through, and I didn't have any of my extra layers, and my friend had gotten a blister, so she was like, oh, I can't go any faster, and so I actually had to leave her to run the last bit because I was so cold. I was just like, I had to warm myself up by running. So it was much more pleasant than the marathon because I had no pressure over time, so it took me like 10 hours, but it was beautiful, and it was just a really nice time. And the marathon, which was, so it's this 30 miles, the Race to the Sea, and the marathon's 24, and that took me 5.5 hours. But with that time pressure, I actually felt of all the people saying, oh, you should be able to do it under 4 hours, and not really realizing all the hills. I actually felt ashamed when I finished the marathon that I hadn't done it faster. So I didn't have that like feeling, wow, I did a marathon, and it was so difficult towards the end, still trying to go up hills after 20 miles. Whereas Race to the Sea, most of it is downhill, especially the end. They throw in a hill right at the end because they're horrible. Right after Clonella, they send you up this hill. It's a lovely view, but you're just like, why?
Just stay on the track.
Why not? Just stay on the track. Why are you sending me up there?
It's lovely to hear that, because I think I know exactly which Race to the Sea you did, because I've spoken to others who did the same. I think you did get
2019,
yeah. Did get many seasons in one day. In fact,
oh yeah. It was
snow or hail.
Yeah, hail, rain, and sunny as well. It was beautiful, sunny in the morning. There was mist and fog. They were like running through before you get to Camustwith and drop down. It was just foggy.
Any local traditions you've become aware of since you've been here?
I've heard and seen a little bit at the Eisteddfod. Eisteddfod, there's one. But I've heard about the Mary Lloyd's, the horse skeleton. That's quite an interesting one. Though, is that more of South Wales, or do people do it here?
Yeah, it's starting to spread across Wales again. It is more of a South Wales Valleys tradition, and in Pembrokeshire as well, and maybe in certain parts of Trefaldwyn. But it is a wonderful tradition. It's What about religion? Have you reconnected with religion here in Ysbyty Ystwyth?
Well, I'm not a religious person. I am spiritual, so I find nature is all I need really for that, for myself, spiritual wise. But back to tradition. Sorry. The Eisteddfod is really an amazing thing, and one thing that I really love about Wales is the focus and the attention that the arts get. So music from a very young age, performing on stage, poetry, arts and crafts. It's incredible. I've not known any other country that has been so focused on encouraging people to do that, and singing as well. The idea that there's men's choirs that just meet at the pub. I think that is a really amazing thing, because there's such a stigma about men singing in other countries. There's not. Here you can do it proudly, and you do it with your other mates. Whereas, men singing in another country, there's something like just not masculine enough about it, which I think, is really great here. Yeah, and the education that kids get as part of their education for craft and arts and music. It's really good. Yeah.
How about your children in terms of the Eisteddfod? What do your children do for the Eisteddfod?
Well, they're a bit shy for the performing things, but they're very good at the crafting things. So, B1, 2 things in the Eisteddfod, the nationals. So, she had 3 things that got firsts in the county, and Indy got a second and 2/3 in the county. So unfortunately, none of hers went to the nationals, although they should have. That's her puppet there. That came second. It should have won overall. It's like
it's all down to the judges, isn't
it? I think some of the judges think that second is actually first, because we're so confused looking at it.
Sometimes I think some of the parents know the judges.
Yeah. I don't want to speak badly about
the
the kids. I think the kids are innocent in this, but the teacher told us that the people who win the puppets every year, because Indy came second last year as well, and her puppet was amazing last year as well. They said they used the same armature again and again, so they just changed the face, and it still wasn't very good. And I was just like, oh my god. So the one that won, Ceredigion, won overall, and that's
Well, long may they continue to compete and enjoy making their creations, because we are, I know we are a creative nation.
Yeah, really.
And you mentioned that we start them early, because it's a good way of developing skills.
Like for me, I did lots of crafty things as a kid, but there was always extra. It was always like either through other things or my parents or friends or things like that. Whereas it's encouraged so much in school, it's just normal. It's not an extra or a different thing. It's part of their learning. They're always doing projects that also have craft element. Like they were learning about the Amazon, and they encouraged them to do their own project for about animals. And B, who's really good at needle felting, she made a bunch of little tiny animals and put it on a tree. So she made a leopard and and a toucan or a parrot, I think, and another sloth, and yeah, and so that's just encouraged. I think that's really, really great.
You mentioned there the race to the sea, organised by Cambrian Mountain Events, if I recall. What other events have you participated in here in Ysbyty Ystwyth or Pontypridd? Does the community here hold regular events?
Not as much as they should, I guess. We did have the first year or two that we were here, they did have a summer fair. But then during COVID, a lot of those things closed down because a lot of the people who organize it are older members of the community, so COVID was a much bigger threat for them. I know that they're trying to start more things again, and they did have a few fairly recently. There was like some educational walks that we did to kind of learn about the what's it called, temperate rainforest, or so yeah. This is a rainforest, even though it's not like a tropical one. It's
I think it feels like being in a rainforest at the moment, because we're surrounded by trees here, window to window, and it's pouring with rain. So yeah, there is such a thing as a Celtic rainforest. We have them dotted around Wales. Some of them have been around for thousands of years, and it's something very Welsh in terms of these rainforests. But it's good to be hearing that people are visiting these rainforests.
And I've done the race in Hafford a few times. The race in Hafford. Actually came in second one year, and so I got a little trophy. I really love that race.
Tell me about the races in the Hafford then. Who organises those and
what's his name?
Mr. Dick Evans?
Yes, that guy. Yeah. He organises them, and he changes the route slightly every year. I've not done it for a few years because it stopped during COVID, and then I wasn't running. I think it was on this year, but I wasn't running, so I did consider it and just walk it. But it is a difficult race because it's a lot of hills, and I think you usually you do 2 laps, so you have to do all those hills twice.
You mentioned earlier when you came here to have a look at the Black Lion, and you stayed at Mice Glass Bed and Breakfast, and you met some local people, and you felt that there was a welcome here.
Oh, we also met our neighbour. Then the next day we came back and looked at the outside of the house again, and we met our neighbour that's just there. He's actually English, but he's had this house for like 40 years, and he and his wife retired moved here in their retirement at the same time as we moved here, so they were coming as their holiday house, and then we met him, and he told us all sorts of different stuff about the area, how it used to be different. He knew the people who used to live here because who lived here and then died. The road used to be different, so where the lay-by used to be the actual road, and so there used to be 2 houses just straight across here that they took down because I guess they were kind of falling down anyway. And so told us about the family, how I don't know if it was the Mr. Evans who lived here or the son that we bought it from, but one of them used to work on the railroad and like ride the cart all the way down to Aberystwyth, just like jump on it and just ride it down. I don't know, it just sounded interesting. And and he's wonderful neighbor. We have all wonderful neighbors. So next to them, Malcolm Burrell is Alan, who used to be a monk. He's quite an interesting character, very interesting guy. And when we first came to pick up the keys, it was December 2016. We couldn't move in immediately, so we needed to do a few things to get it ready to move in. So we came every weekend, or every week, it wasn't necessarily weekend, for a few days for that first month. And there was a little bottle of gin, sloe gin, on our doorstep, and a card from our neighbor Cheryl, and Dave, and they said, welcome, we're really happy to have you here. And they said, we went to say hello, and they said, the day you move in, we'll make dinner for you, so you don't have to worry about dinner. So we moved in and went and had dinner at their house on that day, and then a week later they made dinner for us again to celebrate they'd been here a week, and they were really wonderful to have, and they did baking with our kids and had us over for barbecues, and just really, really welcoming. And I think that the saddest thing is COVID. It just killed a lot of that. So a lot of older people were very worried about it, and it kind of just changed everybody's dynamic with interacting with people, really. So I was working on a documentary idea for this area as well, similar to this, but filming and going on walks and stuff with people. And it was Anne-Marie Carty, I don't know if you know her, but she lives near McCuncliffe, but she came and asked me if I'd be part of this, and we had all this planned, and then COVID just meant we couldn't do any of the interviews because a lot of the people who wanted to interview were older and vulnerable. So
what about the Welsh language? Wyt ti 'di dysgu Cymraeg? Now, given you've been to so many countries, am I going to hear you siarad Cymraeg?
Do we dysgu Cymraeg? Yeah. I was trying to learn. My kids don't speak Welsh perfectly. I was trying to learn. I was doing Duolingo for a while. The problem is that I really learn from talking and listening, and there isn't enough opportunity to just talk and listen and join into the language. Everybody speaks English so readily, much like Holland, like the Netherlands, that it's really hard to just jump into a conversation. And it's when people can speak English so easily, they don't help you as much. It's just too easy to go into.
Have you met anybody in the community who speaks Welsh?
Yeah, I know several people in the community that speak Welsh, and I did try to speak some Welsh at the Eisteddfod when I went to Tregaron last summer. I ordered my food and said a few things, and everybody stayed in Welsh. I think because it was such a Welsh celebration, they knew that there are plenty of people who are learning Welsh, and there was the Welsh learning area, and if you tried to speak Welsh, they definitely didn't change. I would love to learn Welsh, but I do find it difficult if I don't get enough chance to hear it and just practice. And Duolingo is just not very helpful. Like, you keep having to say things that you'd never ever use, like drag dwi. Like, you never say I'm a dragon. Like, I had to do that so many times in Duolingo. I am a dragon.
And all dragons are Welsh, of course.
Yes.
That's probably why.
Yes, I know. It's just always.
What are the challenges of living here in Aberystwyth?
A job. Getting a job. That's the hardest thing for, I think, everybody in the area. And when I decided to go back to university, Rhys was like, okay, I've got to get a job because we won't be able to make enough money on the because he was working with me, but he was like doing the admin and stuff like that, so it really depended on me making the things. So he looked in schools, and I feel like he applied in a couple places, but then he found something at the university. So the university is probably the biggest employer, I'm guessing, in the area, and he was lucky he was able to find something there, and then kind of worked his way up in the project managing. So he already did quite a few.
So Rhys is settled in the university with a pretty permanent job?
Yes, it is now permanent. Yeah,
so that's good for you as a family, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
until I can make enough money making films, then
You just need one.
then he's
you just
gonna
need
go
one
do
film,
something
don't
else.
you?
Yeah.
You just need that one big film of a
Yeah.
spaceship landing
Yeah.
in the Cambrian Mountains,
Yes.
and 3 astronauts coming out and finding
Yeah.
a dragon.
Yes.
And you could say that one classic line,
Yeah.
Draig a dwy.
Exactly, the Welsh dragon who introduces themselves.
And if I can be an extra, please, in
Yes,
the background, dressed
yes.
in the
You could be
green.
the dragon.
I could be the dragon. We're just going to finish on this, really. If you were walking down the street in London today and somebody asked you where you were from,
Mm-hmm.
where would you say you were from?
I would say I live in Wales. Mm-hmm.
And is there something else you'd like to say for the record today in terms of your life living here in the Cambrian Mountains? You mentioned you're settled here.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
good.
settled here, and people do find it perhaps surprising that I like a lot of people have asked if I'm going to move, especially after doing filmmaking, if I'm going to move to London and stuff like that. And I helped with a film that was made here 2 years ago, and I was the director's personal assistant. And because I knew the whole area, I drove them around and I took them everywhere. We filmed in Portmeirion and in Inislas, and I feel like there's at least another place that I'm forgetting. But we also went on quite a few different location scouting things. So
Can I ask which film that was?
My Happy Ending. It just is out in the cinema in America. It's not come out here yet. It wasn't a very big film, I guess, in the end.
Anybody famous?
Andy McDowell, Miriam
No
Margolyes.
way!
Yeah.
From 4 Weddings and a Funeral?
Yes. So she was the big star in it. So Miriam Margolyes, Sally Phillips, Tamsin Gregg.
No filming in the Cambrian Mountains?
No, no, they were considering filming in the Halford, but it didn't quite fit the film. So just in Islas here, and I feel like there was another, and that inside a house it was the other one. So just Portmeirion. They had to have a rainforest, something that looked like a rainforest. So Portmeirion has quite a few different plants that passed.
Next time, Cambrian Mountains.
Mm-hmm. It's not actually set in Wales, the film. So it's actually supposed to be just outside of London. But they filmed here, and they had a set on the university, and they hired students as part of it. But yeah, the directors kind of assumed that I was just stopping here, and I was like, no, live here.
You've stopped here.
I've stopped here.
Travelling.
I've stopped here, yeah. And they were amazed by the waterfall in my garden. They still talk about it. Say, how's your waterfall in your garden? They said they tell people that they know somebody who has a waterfall in their garden, and that's me.
Juliette Daum?
Juliette Daum. Yeah.
Daum. Where does Daum come from?
Well, it's Alsace, France, Germany.
Yeah.
So it was Alsace used to be kind of like its own territory, and that was kind of in between both. So both French and German. So in French, you would say Daum.
As in Puy
de
de
Dôme.
Dôme.
Yes, that's spelled differently, but it's pronounced exactly the same. I have as well. I have as well. It's very near where I lived in France. I have paraglided off of Puy de Dôme.
No,
Yes.
they were paragliding off the day I was there.
Yeah.
And they were giving me the opportunity to go
Maybe
off.
it was the day I was there.
But yeah, we did go out there to stay for a couple of days, bit of research.
In Clermont-Ferrand, or did you stay?
Yes, we went to the
I used to
Parc
bus.
Natural. Juliette Daum.
Yes.
Daum.
And it would be in German. It would be Daum, which means thumb.
Mm-hmm. Can I thank you for your time today? It's been very interesting. That first hour was I didn't know where we were going to go next, and it's been a pleasure to discover more about the owner of a house, the owner of a former pub here in the Cambrian Mountains, a property that I drive past on nearly on a daily basis, and I've just discovered the story of somebody very, very interesting who's got enough interest in her life to write a film. But thank you very much for your time this morning, and I look forward to sharing your story with people of the world, and I hope they will enjoy listening to you as well. Diolch yn fawr iawn ti am dy amser.
Diolch yn fawr.